You're listening to the Animal Free Labcast, the podcast that puts humans, not animals, at the heart of medical research. Welcome to the Animal Free Labcast, everybody. Gemma and I are here again. Hiya,
Hi,
Gemma.
Carla. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. What have we got in today's episode?
Well, given that it was World Day for Animals in Laboratories yesterday, on the 24th of April, today's episode will be about looking at what needs to be done to make sure animals are replaced where they should be in research.
So that's because we don't think that existing law is being properly implemented or enforced.
No.
Obviously, we're calling for new law as well, but the existing law isn't being properly implemented, and we're not the only people that think that.
Exactly. So we've got a special guest today, which is Isabel Martin, our Director of Public Affairs, joining us again. Isabel is going to talk about a report that was published a couple of years ago that looked into whether the 3 Rs are being implemented properly. So the 3 Rs are replacement, reduction and refinement of animals in research. And that's a concept that is enshrined within law to be used as a framework to make science more ethical and work towards replacing animals completely. But as Carla says, these rules aren't being properly enforced and we're not making enough progress with this. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later on.
Yeah, because the 3 Rs are a little bit controversial, aren't they?
Yeah.
So it'd be good just to kind of go over what they are again.
Exactly. And Isabel is also going to give us an update on some work that the Home Office Minister has commissioned, which hopes to strengthen practice on the use of animals in science. So she'll tell us all about that.
Great. And just as a reminder for people, it's the Home Office that regulates the use of animals in laboratories, which is why they're involved, as well as a huge amount of other things that they do. For some reason, they also regulate animal experiments. All right, well, before we dive into that one, Gemma, what about the poll results from last time?
Yeah, so lots of people had lots to say on this. So if you remember, the question was, do you think companies like Neuralink should stop testing brain devices on monkeys and focus on developing human-specific alternatives instead? Yes or no?
I'm going to predict that wasn't wildly controversial.
No, it wasn't. We only had one vote that actually said no, but then that person... There's always one, that person actually left a comment saying, oh no, sorry, I voted no by mistake. And they actually meant to say yes, so it would have been 100% yes.
I wonder if that's what happens every time.
Maybe, yeah, probably. But we had lots of people agreeing and commenting, saying, yes, obviously. We had a couple of comments. Somebody said, surely since Elon is so focused on progressing the human race, he would know better than using monkeys. Non-animal methods are the way forward. So that's from Bronson from Instagram. And then we had another comment from Sharon from Instagram saying, animal-free research has proven results. What is our government waiting for? Give them the green light, for crying out loud. So yes,
Sharon.
People feel very strongly about this.
So lots to talk about this week because there's some breaking news specifically on that, on Sharon's point. So we've been told by the UK government that when it's been thinking about its plans for phasing out animal experiments, one of the things that it's sort of reluctant to do is get out of step with the US regulators. So it doesn't want to go too far and too fast. But 2 interesting pieces of breaking news coming out of America in the last week, probably by the time you hear this, within the last fortnight. But so as we're at the time of recording, this has just come out. So the first is an unexpected and so exciting, game-changing piece of news from the FDA, which is the Food and Drugs Administration, and that regulates the use of animals in drug development in the US. And they really are the leaders. So if they do things, other people are looking to see what they're doing and hopefully getting in line with it, as the UK government have said that they prefer to do. So they've just announced a plan to phase out the use of animal testing for monoclonal antibodies and other drugs and replacing them with more effective human-relevant methods. Those are their words, human-relevant methods. They've also released a roadmap with a 3 to 5 year vision to make animal studies the exception rather than the norm for preclinical safety and toxicity testing. This is just game-changing. This is what we've been calling for. So And they've said as well that not only could this lower research and development costs, which, as we know, are sky high, but ultimately reduce prices for prescription drugs, which could have a huge impact on patients, which clearly, given how the health system works in America, is a really big deal. But obviously, if the UK government was to align, would have a big impact on the NHS as well.
Yep.
So they're going to encourage researchers to use computer modelling, AI, and other methods like organ on a chip. So all the stuff that we talk about on the podcast with you every time. And they want to start using all of the existing data, it's real world safety data, to compare data that's been available from other countries as well, where a drug has already been studied in humans. So this really is a big win. We're seeing it being warmly welcomed by our friends in America who've been lobbying for this for a long time. So we're looking forward to digging into the details because, as I said, this is still breaking news, but we'll be sure to keep you updated. Hopefully, the UK government is also watching these developments unfold.
Well, that's huge, isn't it? And it seems to have come out of nowhere, which is even more exciting because it just seems like there's so much going on in the background that these things are finally starting to happen. So this is a really positive development and we'll see what happens with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I said there was two pieces of news. So Gemma, tell us about the other one.
So the second one isn't so much to do with medical research, but we thought you'd still like to hear about it because it is an area where lots of animals are used every year in some really quite nasty tests. So this one comes from the EPA, which is the Environmental Protection Agency, who are planning to revive its plans to ban animal testing for pesticides and chemicals. So originally they had set themselves a target of phasing out all animal tests by 2035. But that goal was scrapped. But we're pleased to hear that they are now set to revive it. So again, at the time of recording, they hadn't actually set a timeline or year that they're aiming for. But again, this news has been really warmly welcomed by our American friends. And we look forward to seeing these changes being implemented. So yeah, so we'll keep an eye on both these pieces of news and keep you updated. But like Carla said, this is really positive as, American policy tends to be very influential for the rest of the world, including the UK. So let's see what our government do to make sure that we're not left behind.
We'll definitely be keeping a close eye on that. And I'm sure Isabel will be talking with MPs and government about how we need to make sure the UK is not getting left behind.
So welcome, Isabel. What do you think about the developments out of America?
So thank you for having me. It's really exciting news to hear this from America. And I think it's so important. We're really going to be making the case and urging the UK government to act now and make sure that the UK is also taking robust action to move away from animals. I think it's so important because there were concerns from the UK government around not wanting to be out of step with international regulations. And obviously, this development shows that by taking bold action to move away from animals, we absolutely wouldn't be out of step with our international partners. So it's a really important development. We're certainly going to be highlighting the importance of it. And clearly, we're in such a good position in the UK to be in a really leading position in moving away from animals, particularly in light of our excellence in the life sciences and also our sort of national identity as a nation of animal lovers. So really important for the UK government to take bold action now.
I assume the UK government has seen these pieces of news and are watching it with interest. And if they haven't, then they will via you, Isabel.
Absolutely. I'm sure they have too, but we will be absolutely highlighting it over the coming weeks and making sure that it's something they're very much aware of and is on their radar.
So as everyone who listens to our podcast knows, we are calling for Herbie's Law, which is a new piece of legislation. But we also know that the UK government is not hugely minded to have a new law, doesn't really want to put down new legislation. We disagree with them. We think this is the right way to go. But there is also existing legislation which we don't think is being properly implemented or enforced. And we're not the only ones who think that. That's right, isn't it, Isabel? Tell us about the Rule report, for example.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So clearly we're going to continue our call for Herbie's Law, which is so important. But in the meantime, as you say, we're also making the case for existing legislation to be properly enforced, because if it were, that would have a huge impact in actually reducing dramatically the number of animal experiments and improving and making more human specific the medical research that's being done. So the Rule report, that was commissioned by the government-funded National Centre for the 3 Rs, the NC3Rs. It was written by Dr. Frances Rawle. So she's an expert who had a long career at the Medical Research Council, so that's one of the UK government's medical research funding bodies, and she had responsibility for animal research policy. So this report wasn't written by an animal protection organisation.
No.
So the report looks at the regulatory approvals process for animal research, and it looks at the 3 Rs, replacement, reduction and refinement. Clearly what we'll be talking about today is replacing animals in medical research, because that's our goal as an organisation.
And those 3 Rs, Isabel, Gemma and I were just saying earlier that they're quite controversial, but they are enshrined in law. So just to clarify, that's the replacement of animals, which is what we're all about. We are only about animal replacement. We are a 1R organisation, but there are these other 2 concepts, reduction, so reducing the numbers of animals that are used in experiments, and then refinement, which is kind of like making sure they've got bigger cages or they've got better quality food, that sort of thing. We're not about those. We're only about replacement. But clearly, when you've got the National Centre for the 3 Rs, producing a report like this, that's really powerful. So Isabel, tell us more about what it says.
Yeah, absolutely, that's right. So Dr. Rawle carried out about 40 interviews with people who were involved in this process. So from the institution's internal ethical review bodies to regulators and funders, and its findings on replacement are really very damning. The way I think of it, the findings stand out for me, is that everybody thinks somebody else is looking at opportunities for animal replacement, but the reality is that no one really is. And just sort of quoting from it very briefly gives an overview of just how stark the findings are. So it says, for example, replacement does not seem to be covered well by any of the review processes. AWERBs, that's the ethical review bodies, and ASRU, inspectors, those are the regulators, rarely suggest use of replacements. They do not and could not have sufficiently detailed knowledge of the full breadth of the scientific areas they need to cover to know for every application whether appropriate and practicable replacement technologies are available.
Yeah, so kind of touching on your point there, one of the things that I picked up when I read the report as well is that, people were feeding back that maybe they didn't have the relevant knowledge and experience to be able to point people in the right direction where there is an opportunity for replacement. So is there something that can be done to make sure that the right people are in the right places to be able to make these decisions? Or is it a case of, just whoever ends up on these boards ends up passing the buck, assuming that other people have already, looked at it and realised there is no opportunity for reduction and just approved it? So is that kind of how things are going to carry on?
It definitely feels like there's a bit of a not my job, gov kind of attitude going on, which, clearly needs fixing.
Exactly. Is there anything that can be done about that, Isabel?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we feel would really help is if we leverage some of the expertise of the amazing scientific experts on animal replacement methods, many of whom I know you speak with regularly on the podcast, but clearly there's a wealth of knowledge within the country around non-animal methods that can be used within specific research areas. And we've often recommended that actually some of these applications should be shared with experts in these fields so that they could advise on replacement methods. Obviously, that would be done in an anonymised way so that no intellectual property or personal details would be disclosed, and it could be trialled via a pilot program and so on. But that would be a really obvious way that actually some of these gaps in knowledge could be filled, and then the researchers, the applicants themselves, could learn about non-animal methods, which I'm sure they would obviously much prefer to be using themselves.
And obviously, we've offered, access to our scientific community, to the government to do these kind of reviews. But equally, if they don't fancy that, the National Centre for 3Rs also has many, many scientists who are focused on replacement within its community. So this is something that the government really could be doing.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter where the experts come from, just so long as their input is incorporated.
So is there any way that you are able to kind of feed back this kind of evidence to the government? Has there been any opportunities for you to formally submit your thoughts?
Yeah, there has been. So obviously we are frequently briefing parliamentarians about this topic, about our recommendation for Herbie's Law, but in the shorter term about the importance of improving enforcement and regulation. And we actually fed these sorts of recommendations recently into a call for evidence that was put out by the Animals in Science Committee. So I know you'll have spoken about them on the podcast before, but they're a committee that was set up to advise the Home Office on the use of animals in experiments. And the government commissioned them to look at leading practice, and they looked at leading practice within the 3Rs that we were speaking about earlier. And we were invited to respond. And our key point really was that we couldn't be further from a culture of leading practice, given that we're in a situation at the moment where basic legal requirements aren't being enforced. We're really a very long way from a culture of leading practice.
Absolutely.
So we put forward some recommendations as to how in the short term these really important legal obligations can be better enforced.
Yeah, I mean, I think to be calling us leading practice, not only are we not leading practice in terms of enforcing the existing laws that we've got, but we're not leading practice in terms of, the international picture either, as it's, as considering the news that's come out from the US last week. So what other kind of ideas and recommendations have you made, Isabel, to government?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. We've got a long way to go before we're really leading in this area.
Yeah.
Another one that I think is really important that we have suggested as well is to look at introducing a cost for applying for a license to use animals. So there are currently charges for some of the types of licenses, for establishment licenses and personal licenses, but not for the actual project license that gives you the permission to actually do particular experiments on animals. And from our perspective, a really valuable way of generating some more funds that could be used to fund the further development and validation of non-animal methods would be introducing a charge for these applications, for the project license applications, and potentially also looking at making the charge dependent on the projected scale of animal use. So to put it simply, if the project were to use more animals, then it would be more costly for the establishment. And we think that would be actually a really powerful way of incentivizing animal replacement.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. And it would, like you say, generate funds that would help then support scientists to transition to animal-free methods. Do you think there's anything else that could be implemented as well?
So I think it's really important that more funding is made available for the development of non-animal methods and for research that uses these brilliant human-specific methods. So that's something that funding agencies should be focusing on, and the government should be making more funding available for, particularly for transition grants to directly support researchers in moving away from animal and to human-specific research methods.
Well, our scientists always want more money. They're always saying they need more money. So, yeah, we really do hope the government will be looking at that. But it sounds, Isabel, to me like we're in a bit of a vicious cycle with this. We need to kind of like flip it and turn it into a virtuous cycle. So is there stuff that people listening at home can do to help with that?
Absolutely. So the really good thing is that there's such momentum growing now amongst cross-party parliamentarians for moving away from animal-based research and embracing things like Herbie's Law, which is really fantastic. And we know that one of the key things that is really making a difference is people contacting their MPs, because clearly that's who they really want to hear from. They want to know about their constituents' views and the issues that they care about. So more of that is really helpful.
And you do get that feedback, don't you? That people have, MPs have shown up to meetings or have met with you and want to get more involved because it's a live issue that their constituents are talking about.
Absolutely. We constantly get feedback about that, so we know how powerful it is.
And what's the best way for supporters to make sure that their MP know that this is an important issue?
So if they have time available, what's really fantastic is to actually ask to meet their local MP at one of their constituency surgeries. So if you contact your local MP's office, you should be able to arrange a short meeting with them, about 10 minutes or so, where you actually go along to their local surgery and speak to them about issues that are of particular concern to you. So it could be this one, for example. We're always really happy to provide advice or briefing materials if that's something that listeners would like to do. And also, if you have a bit less time, or in addition, it's brilliant if you can take our online actions too. And the best way to do that, to stay up to date with those, is to join our email list, and then you'll know as soon as we have some new online actions for you to take.
So if people are interested, then they can join. You can join our mailing list via our website, animalfreeresearchuk.org. Or if you want some support for a constituency MP meeting, then if you email hello@animalfreeresearchuk.org, you can let us know who you're meeting, and Isabel and her team will be in touch with briefing materials. That's right, isn't it, Isabel?
That's right.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Isabel. It's always great to hear about all of the latest that's going on, and especially in light of this, exciting news. I'm hoping that you'll come on and talk to us again and just give us all the updates, perhaps possibly even in the next podcast.
Absolutely. I'd be delighted to.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Isabel.
So we're going to be having a little bit of a break, aren't we, from the podcast, because we've got some holidays coming up. We will be back on the 16th of May. Gemma will be away, but Isabel will be joining me then. So we'll be doing a big public affairs takeover, talking all about the latest with Herbie's Law. But in the meantime, Gemma, let's talk about this week's poll question.
Yeah, so thinking about everything we've been talking about, the question is the UK being left behind following the FDA's announcement that it's going to phase out animal testing in drug development? Yes or no? And you can vote on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, X, and Carla's Substack, the Animal Free Labcast, and we'll discuss the results in the next episode. And if you'd like to tell us your thoughts about the poll or anything else in this episode, please leave us a message on 0208 054 96 95. That's 0208 054 96 95.
Brill. Can you say the poll question one more time, Gemma?
Is the UK being left behind following the FDA's announcement that it's going to phase out animal testing in drug development? Yes or no?
Oh, I wonder if we can get 100% yes this time.
Let's hope so. No mistakes this time.
Well, that's all we've got time for in this week's podcast, but you can stay part of the conversation by reading my brand new companion blog on Substack. Just search for the Animal Free Labcast to read and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Animal Free Labcast, the podcast that puts humans, not animals, at the heart of medical research. If you want to find out about more ways to move to a world of animal-free research, then head to our website, animalfreeresearchuk.org. And if you'd like to send us an audio message about the poll or anything else you've heard in the podcast, then leave us a voicemail on 0208 054 9695. That's 0208 054 9695. Thank you for listening.